Hey there. This is Leslie Noble, and this is the No Truth. Hey there. This is Leslie Noble, and this is the No Bullshit Truth podcast. This podcast is for educational purposes and inspirational purposes only. It is not therapy. It's not a substitute for therapy, and it does not constitute medical or mental health services or advice. Please seek support from a qualified professional who is familiar with your story or your specific needs. Okay, all right, here we are again. So, thank you for joining me. So, today I want to talk about how to never give up ever again. And I know that sounds almost impossible, but I have people ask me all the time, how did you get where you are right now? And a lot of what I say is because I didn't give up. So, there is a moment in every healing journey where you start to realize something important. You didn't give up on yourself because you were weak. You gave up because you were tired, overwhelmed, or carrying pain that you just never had time to process correctly. So it's not that you're lazy or that you're too insecure or that you're a weak person. It's that sometimes we don't have the tools we need to process that pain. You're tired or you're living in survival mode. So today's episode is just about that, how to never give up on yourself ever again, especially when it comes to your healing. Because most people don't fail at healing, they just give up too soon. I'm going to say that again. Most people don't fail at healing. They just give up too soon. Not because you don't want to get better, but because healing asks you to face things you were never taught how to face. And I know the other thing I want to say about this is that sometimes your brain and your body is not ready for you to open up everything all at once. So one of the things I always tell people is healing is a spiral. There are going to be times where you feel like you're taking steps backwards. There's going to feel like you've taken 10 steps forward. You're going to be too tired to work on your healing. But the most important thing is that you don't give up on yourself. There were moments, definitely, where in my own life where it felt impossible to work on my healing. It felt like it was never going to happen. I was never going to get there. But I just never gave up on myself. And I want the same for you. I would love to give you this formula, to do this and you'll heal. But that wouldn't be responsible of me. It would be, I've been a therapist for 29 years, and what works for one person does not work. There is no template that I can give you and say, go do this and it will work for you. But what I can say to you is to not give up on yourself and to go seek help and not be afraid to ask for help if you need it. People don't give up on themselves because they have this lack of discipline or you don't desire. Most people that I talk to when they come into therapy, they didn't want to give up on themselves. They really desire, and they've been trying. And some people have tried all sorts of things. I've had people come to me after they've seen 10 different therapists and feel like they're not making progress. And so I want you to know part of why we stop is because we're really comfortable with the identity that we have now. And that identity is what is keeping us safe. And also grieving the fantasy that certain people will finally show up. That's important one. And one pattern I see with clients all the time is kind of hoping that, that person that hurt me or that person that betrayed me is going to finally see the light and they're going to come to me and they're going to finally show up in the way I need them to show up. And it feels like you're losing the life that you know. And there's a lot of grief that comes with that. And losing the identity that you know. Because if I heal, what will I have to do different? And that's scary. It's really scary. But it's worth it on the other side. Also, I think some people, especially when you've come from a difficult background, you tend to minimize your pain. I know one of the things I've realized about myself is I have a really high pain tolerance in lots of areas of my life. I'm pretty strong. And one of the things I've had to stop doing is minimizing when something was painful for me or something that hurt. My reaction in the past has been to just pull myself up from my bootstraps and move forward and until I collapse and I'm burned out and I'm tired. And so part of it has been realizing you can't minimize your pain. Some of that is born in the history of that we grow up with people that have minimized our pain, or we've grown up with people that tell us not to feel, or even just not knowing how to ask for support, or you don't have support, or you don't have the language or even understand what emotional safety looks like. Sometimes we don't want to heal because we think it should be fast or linear or aesthetically pleasing. I think social media sometimes does us a disservice because it makes us look like this person's in there. They show these glow up TikTok videos now, the before and after when people get in relationships, and it's astounding. But one of the things they don't show you is the messy middle, and that's the part where the actual healing is. And I talked about that in the first podcast about the butterfly in the cocoon and how it's mush and it dissolves. Well, that's what happens with healing. Your identity, who you were before, dissolves into a newer identity. And that middle part of the healing can be messy and raw and so much grief. So I want you to know too that giving up it was not a personal failure. If you've gone to therapy and you've dropped out, or you started on a path and then you were going to leave a relationship and then you got scared and you backed out, that's not a personal failure. It's a trauma response. It's the body saying, I'm not ready to do this yet, or I can't do this alone and I need support. So this is why people give up on themselves, is fear. And I don't want you to see that as a personal failure. It's not. It is your body's and brain's way of keeping itself safe. So let's talk about now, why does healing take so long? I remember thinking, it's been 6 years since I've just dived, and it did not just take me, okay, I'm 6 months and this should be, that's kind of what I thought. And it's funny because I'm a therapist, right? But your body and your brain and your nervous system heals at the pace and the timing that's right for it. And you can't rush that, because if you rush that, then you're going to be all kinds of triggered. So healing isn't slow because you're doing it wrong. Healing is slow because you're doing something so profound. You're doing something so profound. You're unlearning survival patterns that protected you, a lifetime of survival patterns. You're breaking generational cycles. You're confronting your truths that all of your family avoided. You are reclaiming parts of yourself that you exiled to survive. You're learning to trust yourself after years and years of self-abandonment. It is sacred work. It is not supposed to be fast. It is supposed to be true. I want to say a little bit more about breaking generational patterns. That not only is that sacred work, it is hard work, it is lonely work, but it's also the most courageous work you can ever do. It is you sort of feeling like at times you're on the outside looking in at your family patterns. sometimes the reason patterns continue, there's actually a lot of research on generational patterns, and I want to quickly say something about that. You can look it up. It's called epigenetics, but they did a study on survivors of the Holocaust and the generational patterns of the great-grandchildren and the great-great-great-grandchildren of the Nazi survivors of the Holocaust. And what they found is they had a higher degree of anxiety and PTSD symptoms, even though they had not actually been in the middle of the Holocaust. Generational patterns are real. I know in my family, addiction was a generational pattern. Abuse was a generational pattern. And it continues in a family until somebody says no more and breaks it. And that is brave, because you are changing the generations from here forward. One of the things I'm most grateful for in my own life is that my children are not going to repeat those patterns. I mean, they haven't. They're both thriving and doing well. So it just takes one person to do it. So I want you to know that the reason healing takes as long as it does is because there's so much to it. And it's unlearning patterns. And some of those patterns have served you for a very long time. So there also is this moment that happens in the healing journey when you decide that you're done giving up. I talked about that last episode where I was in my apartment and I decided that's it. This is never going to happen again. Because I was embarrassed. I could not believe that here I am again. And it was painful. And that was the moment I said to myself, the pain of staying where I am is greater than the pain it's going to be to take to do what I need to do to heal. There's a moment I think that we all have, some people call it rock bottom. You can feel it, where you say, I am not abandoning myself anymore. I am not collapsing because someone else is uncomfortable. I'm not shrinking to keep the peace anymore. And I am not giving up on myself ever, ever, ever again. That's the moment where everything starts to shift and real healing begins. Not the soft kind with the candles and the person sitting out there meditating on a rock, but the grounded, adult, embodied healing that actually starts to transform your life. So it starts with a decision to never give up. And then when you fall backwards, because you'll be like, oh, here I'm going back into that pattern again that I thought I'd given up. You get right back on it and you don't give up. And then over time, you start to become a new person. So I want to shift into 3 reasons people stop healing a little bit. Some of the things that happen in that messy, messy middle. I talked about the cocoon before the butterfly. When you're in that mush phase, it's because healing feels worse before it feels better. And that's where people stop. I'll even notice it in therapy. Sometimes I'll have clients come in and want to work on trauma. And then once we start getting into the trauma, they start backing off of therapy or they become too busy. And it's not because they're failing, and it's not because they've done anything wrong. And I definitely never judge it, not at all. But it's because finally you're feeling the stuff you don't want to feel and the stuff you've been avoiding. But that discomfort can be information, not a threat. It is part of the process of healing. There is no pain-free way of healing. As human beings, we don't want to feel bad. We don't want to feel. And I've had people say to me, I'm afraid if I feel, I'll never stop crying. And you will. Your brain and your body is not going to allow you to cry for the next 50 years. You may grieve really hard over the next 2 or 3 years if you begin the healing process. But on the other side of it is a lot of inner peace. That's what's on the other side of allowing yourself to feel. It's not going to engulf you. And if you feel like you can't handle the pain, that's when you reach out and get some help. You also can't heal. And this is the second reason people stop healing in the middle. You can't heal in the same environment that's wounding you. I'm going to say that again. You cannot heal in an environment that is wounding you. I see this all the time. I want to feel better, but I don't want to leave the relationship that's hurting me and that's wounding me. I want this to get better and never happen again, but the partner doesn't want to change, but I want to change. You can't stay in the same environment that wounded you and heal. You can't grow there. You can't transform there. I work with couples and I say this to them all the time. You have to be both feet in to make this better. You have to be both feet in for this relationship to grow, for you to heal, for you to speak truth to each other. You have to be able to be both feet in. You also have to create different distance sometimes in the healing process from family and people that have caused you pain and that you're grieving. And sometimes they won't understand why you sort of are pushing them away a little bit, because you can't be in the same patterns and the same dynamics to heal. It just doesn't work. So you can hold both to be true. You can still love your family. You can still love the people in it, but give yourself some emotional, physical, and energetic boundaries and some separateness so that boundaries aren't punishment. They're just conditions for the healing that you need to do. So the other thing I want to say, the last thing on the 3 reasons, is that healing is not just a moment in time. It's not a time when you go, okay, yay, I've graduated, I'm healed. There will be a moment when you realize, and it was for me, how I knew that I was there is because I felt more peace most days than I did not. But healing is a lifestyle because there's always going to be stuff coming up. That's growth, that's evolution as a human being. And for us to not become stagnant, we must grow. It comes with 1,000 micro choices every day that say, I am not abandoning myself today. You focus on the next right step. Healing happens in increments and not leaps. So let me just kind of share with you in my lifestyle what I've been doing as part of my healing. I am into meditation. It's an important thing for me. I've also really gotten into yoga, kundalini, some energy healing, and I have these little micro habits that I do. I also am a writer, so I write how I feel. Sometimes if something bothers me or something triggers me, I've always said writing is my exhale. So those are some micro things that I do where I don't abandon myself. Also, promises I've kept to myself. If I say to myself, I'm going to practice, I'm really into martial arts right now, I've been training, I'm going to practice today, I just make sure that I follow through. You know, I look at ways where I'm not going to abandon myself today. If I set the goal to drink more water, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take care of myself in that way. If I'm going to take some time and read a book for pleasure, that's healing too. It's those micro habits and those things that you come up with that bring you joy, but also following through on the things that you need to do for yourself. That's where I'm talking about how sometimes you slide backwards. And sometimes I do. Like I'll have a couple of days where I didn't write. And I'm like, oh, I got to get back on that. So it's just getting right back on it. And then, you know, what does it look like to never give up again? And I know when I say that, you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds so easy. But I'll tell you what it looks like, okay? It looks like resting without quitting, naming what hurts without apologizing, letting yourself feel without judgment, walking away from people that refuse accountability for themselves and for others, choosing the long game. Choosing the long game. We want it to be quick, but it's not always quick. Letting your healing be messy and non-linear, and do not apologize. for feeling what you feel. Returning to yourself again and again and again. It's not about perfection, it's about commitment. It's not about perfection, it's about commitment to yourself. And you are so worthy of that life where you feel that inner peace, where you have relationships that value and respect you, where you have people in your life that honor you, where you don't abandon yourself, where you're thriving. You do not have to be fearless to heal. You don't need to be confident. I know this is probably going to be shocking because here I am on a podcast, and I really have accepted the fact that I am never going to feel like I'm good enough. I feel like that's just a part of what happens when you have survived some trauma. But I don't let that feeling dictate who I am. I don't let it dictate what I do. I had a funny moment with confidence I'm in martial arts, and I took a belt test and I was dying. So that was the time when my ass showed that I wasn't as confident as I'd like to put out sometimes. But you don't have to feel confident to be working on yourself and working in that direction. And you don't have to always know what you're doing. There's so much in the doing and the moving forward and being pulled by the vision of what you want your life to look like. You just need to stay with yourself. So even when I'm doing things, I just stay with myself and I do the next right thing. It's not about becoming someone new. However, sometimes you do become someone different than you were before, but it's about returning to yourself before the world taught you to abandon yourself. We're taught that every single day. And when you stop giving up on yourself, you stop giving up on your life. And you are worthy of that. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is Leslie Noble with No Bullshit Truth Radio. And I'd love for you to join my community. I'm the founder of the Strong Heart Warrior Project, where we learn how to heal from betrayal and rewrite our stories, where we learn to thrive. I'd love for you to be a part of that community. I'd also love for you to follow me on Instagram and my new YouTube channel, the 30 seconds or more of No Bullshit Truth. Like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.